There is a subtle yet profound fracture in the way our age marks sense of truth. We live in a moment when the loudest voice is mistaken for the most knowledgeable, and certainty is assured to be competence. When authority is declared before it has ever been earned, when judgments cascade from those who have never stood where consequence meets reality, we begin to govern by ignorance rather than understanding. This is not merely a rhetorical problem, it is a moral one. It is the difference between narrative and lived reality, between assertion and accountability. What happens when leadership speaks with confidence about sacrifice, conflict, and human cost, yet has never shouldered those burdens? When public discourse is dominated by declarations devoid of consequence? This is the question that animates the conversation I would like to have. No need to name any names, really, but what we refuse to ignore. Welcome. This is Majesty Sussex Report, and I'm Antonio. Thank you for spending some of your valuable time here with us. Really appreciate it. At the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, a voice emerged that refused the comfortable myth of continuity, that long narrative of a global rules based order where old certainties persist. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a speech that quietly but unmistakably dismantled that myth. He described the current international system not as in transition, but in rupture, a break from what once was assumed, a moment that requires honesty about the world as it is rather than what we wish it to be. Carney did this without reducing reality to mockery, without naming names, and yet his message was unmistakably directed at the deepest stain in contemporary leadership: the refusal to reckon with consequence. Carney's argument was not ideological, it was diagnostic. He invoked history and moral clarity to show that the world's architecture of cooperation on security, on commerce, on diplomacy had grown brittle, not because it failed to aspire, but because many of its custodians had stopped narrating it truthfully. In doing so, Carney articulated something subtle and essential: that authority without experience is the most dangerous force in any room. That when power detaches from accountability, it generates a kind of ignorance that feels dangerously like certainty. This theoretical rupture became tangible when current events brought its consequences into the open. A recent political interview revived a long standing stain in public rhetoric: the dismissal of collective sacrifice as if it were optional or negligible. It is a pattern we have seen before. Leaders speaking with casual certainty about wars they never witnessed, about alliances they have never reinforced, about human cost they have never felt. The ripple effects are real. Words that erase realities shape policies that disregard histories. And those histories are etched in memory, in loss, in the shattered lives of families who never asked for the burden they were given. Into that breach stepped a voice that knew what it was speaking of, because he had walked where others only pontificated. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, a veteran, a captain, spoke with restraint, dignity, and unmistakable moral gravity in response to disparaging comments about the role of Allied forces in Afghanistan. He reminded the world of a moment in history when Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty was invoked for the first and only time, a declaration of collective defense after the September 11 attacks.
In 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in history. It meant that every allied nation was obliged to stand with the United States in Afghanistan in pursuit of our shared security. Allies answered that call. I served there. I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there, he continues. The United Kingdom alone had 457 service personnel killed. Thousands of lives were changed forever. Mothers and fathers buried sons and daughters. Children were left without a parent. Families are left carrying the cost. Those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect, as we all remain united and loyal to the defense of diplomacy and peace.
This was not an emotional outburst. It was a calibrated refusal to let lived sacrifice be rewritten as convenience. This was a veteran, not a commentator, speaking on behalf of the absent dead, of the families left without closure, of the memories that do not dissolve at the sound of political rhetoric. That contrast between those who live consequence and those who theorized it is the moral fault line at the core of our times. In cultural discourse, a similar dynamic plays out when the instruments of public judgment are wielded by those who have never faced the pressures they judge. Consider the case of Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, not as an icon, not as a symbol, but as a life forced into a rhetorical arena designed to dehumanize. The scrutiny she has endured, the narrative spun about her, about her intentions, about her character, by commentators who have never walked a mile in her shoes, reflects the broader pattern we see in geopolitics, the sort of armchair authority trumping lived truth. Her experience, like Harry's military service, is not a spectacle. It is evidence of what happens when the public sphere treats human complexity as a data point in entertainment or ideology. When judgment is pronounced without empathy, when narrative overrides nuance. This is why Prince Harry's response matters in more than just a military context. It stands in stark relief to an age that too often mistakes volume for insight. So let's be clear in our critique. We're not here to name names for the sake of name calling. We are here to confront a pattern, the pattern of authority assumed, narrative decreed, and consequence ignored. In public discourse, when leaders speak with confidence about sacrifice they have never endured, when alliances are disparaged by those who have never honored them, when histories of shared struggle are reduced to slogans or dismissals, when judgment is pronounced without empathy, nuance, or reflection, then we are no longer engaged in governance by understanding. We are engaged in governance by ignorance. The truth begins with honesty about reality. Then, the first act of leadership is to respect the weight of consequence, to speak of loss with respect, to acknowledge sacrifice without distortion, to narrate history without erasure. We can choose to listen to those who have lived what they describe, or we can continue to elevate those who choose narratives over experience. You see, the difference between the two is not rhetorical, it is moral. It is moral. And that difference between knowing and presuming is the difference between a world governed by understanding and one led by pure ignorance. That, my friends, that conversation is always worth having because it matters. It matters.
We rise from fields where shadows rest, from dawn's first breath to twilight's crest. We carry loss like names carved deep in hearts that ache while others sleep. Not by the sword alone are we defined, by the courage sown into the mud, the steadfast truth that will not bend, the song of those who will ascend. For every step that faltered in the dark, for every soul that light could never mar, we sing not of endings, fragile and frail, but of a spirit that will prevail. This is for the unconquered, for the brave who stood when silence fell, for hearts that broke but learned to swell, with hope that never bowed to fear, for those who gave what time could not reclaim, for families holding love without a name. Our voices rise, unbroken flame, for the unheard we proclaim. In winds that carry distant cries, in tear-soft nights and hopeful skies, we see their faces in every dawn, the fallen singing on and on. The peacemakers whose quiet hands have sown new ground in broken lands, their resolve a bridge across despair, their mercy breathed into the air. When the night seemed to endless, grief erased all recompense, we clasped each other through the storm, a fellowship of souls reborn. No glory sought, no laurels worn, just sacred hearts no threat could scorn. In every pulse a vow remains to rise, to heal, to break the chain. This is for the unconquered, for the brave who stood when silence fell, for hearts that broke but learned to swell, with hope that never bowed to fear, for those who gave what time could not reclaim, for families holding love without a name. Our voices rise, unbroken flame, for the unheard we proclaim. So let the anthem echo wide across the seas, across the tide, for every spirit that refused to bow, for every vow unbroken now. We stand united, ever strong, their legacy in every song, forevermore in hearts alive. The unconquered standing through all time. This is for the unconquered, for the brave who stood when silence fell, for hearts that broke but learned to swell, with hope that never bowed to fear, for those who gave what time could not reclaim, for families holding love without a name. Our voices rise, unbroken flame, for the unconquered we proclaim. So let the anthem echo wide across the seas, across the tide, for every spirit that refused to bow, for every vow unbroken now, we stand united. legacy in every song, forevermore in hearts aligned. The unconquered, standing through all time. For